Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order has posted huge sales numbers since release. It's outsold all of EA's previous outings with that license, and it seems that critics are happy, fans are happy, and EA have Respawn to thank for all of it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. Your support means a whole lot, so like, sub, and ring that bell to keep the algorithm happy, and let's get into the video. So, Fallen Order's release was stellar. It had the fastest selling digital launch of any EA Star Wars game across all platforms, and it quickly became the top selling Star Wars title ever on PC. The game is critically acclaimed, posting solid scores across the board, but it's also user acclaimed, which, well, I think is a bit more important when talking about games and sales. The Metascore is 82 and the user score is 8.2, so yes, everyone pretty much is happy. And really, yeah, like a new Star Wars game being so positively received, that's pretty novel. EA have held the Star Wars license since 2014, but it is due to expire in 2024. And since then, well, they've published the Battlefronts, and they've published this. Now, before that, there was the Old Republic, which, in terms of sales, performed better than EA expected. It was off to a pretty strong start, but it didn't really last forever. But interestingly, where Tor actually found its success again was when they focused on their single-player narrative expansions. Now, Star Wars Battlefront did also exceed expectations too, although those were way higher expectations. A reported 12 million copies were sold by the end of December in its year, and that was beating their original goal of 10 million. Critically though, it was a very average game, getting just over 70 on average. Now, Star Wars Battlefront 2, on the other hand, well, it did not meet expectations. It fell short of their 10 million goal by that December by 1 million copies, so really didn't do that well. They attributed that underperformance to the loot box controversy as well. I'd say there's a few other things involved there, but I mean, they're probably mostly right there, although the game, like it did, just overall score lower than its predecessor. Now, this whole mismanagement of the Star Wars franchise is a fairly interesting one, because the newer crop of them, you really do see them being games that EA were trying to kind of hammer into their business model. Star Wars Battlefront 1, well, that just, I mean, the more recent one, that just had the problem of release dates, right? They wanted that to come out with The Force Awakens. However, for Battlefront 2, you could tell that they were really trying to stuff in that FIFA Ultimate Team-like business model into that game, and it really was quite ruinous. Now, there have been other attempts internally at EA for, more diverse Star Wars content, but of course, with the Frostbite engine and not really enough will from EA management, that's what led to the Visceral Games Amy Hennig project being canned. A very expensive canning and big waste of money as well. So it really has been interesting just how much this franchise has been mismanaged by EA and how little content they actually had got out, I mean, until now, like in their overall tenure. I mean, really within the Star Wars world, like if you can just do a shooter with a Star Wars skin, that's basically the easiest thing that you can do. But I think what a lot of Star Wars players probably wanted was, to be a Jedi or a Sith or a Grey Jedi, something like that. And yeah, Battlefront was great, but there's more to Star Wars than that, and they really failed to get the diversity there until Fallen Order. Now, on Fallen Order, we don't actually have exact numbers, but we can learn a little bit from reports and charts. So the UK physical charts are not great, but Fallen Order has held the second spot against both COD and Pokemon Sword at launch. And then EA themselves have said that Fallen Order's performance has dwarfed that of all its previous Star Wars titles. Now, as we just established, those titles actually did sell very well, even though they weren't critically well received. So, why has Fallen Order been so successful? And you know what? This is a simple one. I think it's a game for gamers. It's got no BS, there's no random business model things or live service roadmap thrown into it. It's a pretty simple, straightforward game made for people who enjoy playing games. I mean, it just has strong mechanics. If you think about that game and you really try to boil it down, and I'll admit this is being rather reductionist, but it's so clearly aimed at core gamers. I mean, you have got a lot of Sekiro in there, you've got a lot of Dark Souls thrown in there. I know there's similar design language in those games, of course, but that's a lot of where the combat system comes from. Now, that is not just a regular hack and slash, walk up to a stormtrooper, just hit the button until they die. It's a game that actually does require a bit of skill to play. It's a game made for core gamers, and if you look at its explorative elements, that's Metroidvania as hell. It's very rare to see that sort of thing just come out and be really good, especially from a company like EA, when we are so used to their output being, Star Wars Battlefront 2, where they tried to make it like FIFA Ultimate Team, or Anthem, with how they tried to make that a big live service game, whereas this was just, hey, let's get a really good team to make a really good game with core gamers in mind, with a lot of really solid, battle-tested game mechanics. Is it the most innovative game ever? Absolutely not. Like, this is I think this game is a little bit of the Apple approach, right? It's not inventing anything, but it's taking tried and true things and it's putting them together in a way that is good enough that it feels novel. That's why I think this game has been so refreshing to many. And as to how well, I think a lot of that is Respawn. They really are quite an outlier, and in a good way. So Dan Stapleton, IGN's executive editor of reviews, pointed out that since 2014, EA have published 4 games that have an IGN score of 9 or higher. Those are Fallen Order, Apex Legends, Titanfall 2, and Battlefield 1. Now, Respawn developed 3 of those games. And yes, IGN, I mean, they have IGN reviews. They're a bit higher than most people are used to. But, you know, the consensus is that those are all really solid games from Respawn. And it does seem like Respawn's results, as well as their leader Vince's apparent sway at EA, that has allowed them to maintain a degree of independence since their $400 million acquisition by EA in 2017. Now, Respawn's almost unique identity as a gameplay-first developer, I mean, that did seem to have actually survived their purchase by EA. They've continued to make great games that, again, they really do have core gamers in mind. And as Vince, himself has said, they chase the fun. I think they really do. Now, Apex Legends may have had some monetization issues in the past for sure, but its core gameplay, I think, is accepted to be quite fantastic. It's been improving since launch as well, and EA are clearly reaping the financial rewards there. So you've got to wonder, why are Respawn so good? And will that actually rub off on EA as an organization? I think there's a few different things there. So if you look at the DNA of Respawn, I mean, that really is just, core games, right? That was the original sort of Call of Duty team that really led the charge there. And sure, they had some of their struggles with the Titanfall franchise, but if you look at Titanfall 2, great storytellers, great gameplay, and you really see how they've carried that on as a studio. Now, what's very interesting there is the technical side of things. So, they use the Source engine for the Titanfall franchise. Now, that's quite interesting because EA overall have really mandated using Frostbite, and that is something that really led to so many problems for so many teams. It's a part of why Amy Hennig's team over at Visceral Games just had so many problems making Star Wars Ragtag, which of course led to the death of that studio. It's why BioWare have had so many problems with their recent games, but if you look at Respawn, have they had to use it? No, they have not. Now, a part of that is that they have had projects in progress, right? So reportedly, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was actually not skinned as Star Wars in the very beginning. They were working on stuff in Unreal. Then the opportunity for Star Wars came up and they decided, okay, we're going to do that. And just all sort of worked and followed through from there. But the thing is, they were using Unreal, a tried and tested tool. Now, it's definitely fair to say that the Source engine is not the most tried and tested tool everywhere. It's not a widely used engine, but clearly they'd worked with it a lot for Titanfall 1, carried well over to Titanfall 2, and then also over to Apex Legends. So with Respawn, you just see that freedom being able to use the technology that they want to use for their games. Now, part of that could be that they've just had, in progress projects, and then maybe it was just quicker to do Apex Legends, not changing the entire code base over to be, working on Frostbite. But then for future projects, once they're starting out from scratch, so they will use Frostbite, that could be the case. But from what we understand, Vince Zampella, the leader there, he basically has a lot of sway in EA being on the board, and that has allowed him to, just basically ensure that his own studio has the freedom that they need. And what's nice to see is that, yeah, when this team has the freedom that they need, they make really good quality games for core gamers. And that really is a refreshing thing. There's so many times you just see games that are, Anthem, that's a game for core gamers, but it's for core gamers, but with a whole bunch of BS that's meant to string them along, or at least that was the original plan, right? It's so hard these days, or at least it feels that way, to just get a really good game and have that be that. And interestingly, Respawn have been able to do that. Now, the big question is, will this rub off on EA as an overall organization? And I think that's a bit of a tricky question, because there's no way that Fallen Order is going to give them the recurring FIFA Ultimate Team-like revenue that they really want, that they obviously wanted from Battlefront 2. However, it's definitely going to diversify their portfolio, right? It definitely is a really good play for them. It's obviously been a success. Maybe they've seen, Sekiro was actually really good for Activision. So maybe these sort of less risky other plays are going to be a good idea. Because if you think about the risk proposition of projects, okay? If you are making, say, a totally new type of Star Wars game, the Amy Hennig one, right? And you're doing that in technology, like using Frostbite, it's not really meant for that type of game. There's a whole bunch of risks there. Or if you're trying to make the next big live service that's a massive, 6-year development time frame with so many millions of dollars on new technology, that's a massive big gamble for the future. Whereas if this is like, oh yeah, that's a 2-year game, they had a really solid plan, they were using known technology, they were iterating upon known, tried, true, successful game mechanics, and it just made a great game and loads of people purchased it. If this game could prove that to EA, we could see more diversification. And personally, my hope there is that that would let BioWare have a little bit more freedom in how they're doing their games. Now, that said, from what I understand, they are just plowing ahead with Frostbite. Of course, it's BioWare. I wish them the best. I want that to go in a far better direction than it has been going, but I suppose I'm still a little bit concerned. But overall, I think if EA are being wise, they will look at what Respawn have been able to achieve. They'll hopefully look at the essential reasons as to why, and they'll apply that to the rest of their teams. And then I'll just add a final cultural angle to this, which is, yeah, you know what? There's a whole bunch of core gamers out there. They've got PCs, they've got consoles, and they just want games that aren't messing them around. And even a game like this, I'm not a Star Wars fan, but this is a game that I'm interested in because it's just a good quality game that's not going to mess me around. And I know if I have a weekend to put into it, it's going to be a real safe bet, and I'm probably going to enjoy it. So look forward in this one. I mean, Fallen Order could be the beginning also of a dedicated single-player franchise, which would be a departure from EA's historical insistence on multiplayer money spinning, but Respawn appears to be in this for the long haul. They've even mentioned wanting to continue Cal's story in the future, which certainly would be nice. EA will be happy with the money coming in here, and I think players would be happy with the content coming out. So let me know, what do you think about this? Do you just want more games, or do you want games being made that are mostly safe bets, but are just relying on really good execution and just being a really good experience that's, in a way, a safe bet? For me, I want my experimental indies, I want, my big experimental AAAs, but there's also things like this where, yeah, there's a tried and true format, you can innovate on that, in a little way within itself, and just give a new experience that will be memorable and will be really enjoyable, and it seems like that's what they've really been able to do here. So, let me know what you think, let me know what kind of stuff you want from your games, and with that, I will see you next time.